All right, and without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Shane Winnings is here. Man, how are you, brother?
I'm doing well.
Your
It's been a
beard
great
is
weekend.
so much more majestic than mine. I don't know if we can have this
He's
air.
got us beat real bad.
Well, you can grow right here. I can't grow it right here.
Yeah.
And so
I tried this like beard oil and vitamin spray. I don't know. I think it worked.
It just popped out.
Yeah, well, I
that.
shaved every day for years, so I finally gave it a chance, and it showed up on me.
First thing I did when I got out, and you're a fellow Army veteran yourself, and first thing I did when I finally said, you know what, I think I'm going to talk for a living. I think there's something there. I quit shaving. A razor has not touched this face since December of 2016.
That's as long as it gets?
Yeah. Well, no. I trim it with like a thing, but I mean like actual razor and everything.
Okay.
No, because mine doesn't grow right here. I can't let it grow because it doesn't look funky. Yeah, it starts to look weird when it's too far
I
out.
shaved it once. I grew it out a little shorter than this. I got out last year.
Really?
Well, I got out. So I was in the Army for 4 years. Then I was a cop for 5 years. So I was shaving again.
Wow.
You know? I quit that last year. I grew it out, and then I was like, man, I want to see what I look like clean shaven. There's a reason that God allowed us to grow beards. Because I hated my face. I miss it.
I tell everyone, unless you're in some kind of line of service, any man that can grow a beard looks better with a beard.
It's true.
Than without a beard.
Yeah, it should be a law.
Yeah, it should be. It should be mandated by law that if you have the ability to grow a beard,
yes,
you should.
I
should
totally
just do
agree.
It. Anyway, all right.
It helps with our profession. People listen. They're like, "Oh, he's got a facial hair. I should listen to him."
Listen to men with beards.
It's weird.
They just do.
You command respect.
Well, and if I were to shave it off, I would look 10 years younger.
Right.
Well, I would probably look my actual age. Like I'm 35.
Okay, I wouldn't have guessed that.
But I look 42 or 43.
Yeah, I'm 32 next month.
Yeah, exactly. And so if I shave the beard off, I feel like I would look 35 then instead of super old. Anyway, all right. So
we're here to talk about beards.
So apparently.
Beards and Christianity.
Anyway, well, Jesus. Anyway, all right. The point is, all right, moving forward. So you are a guy that seems very much like myself. And what I mean by that is look kind of like a gruff dude. You obviously go to the gym and stuff. You obviously are a veteran, right? Like it's very easy to tell. I wish it wasn't stereotypical, but 9 times out of 10 it is like, that guy obviously did something, right? And so I'm very interested to hear how you went from being in the military, being in law enforcement, to feeling that pull from God that there was something else that you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
Because we have felt that ourselves. And in the past year, we've really made a shift to more kingdom work things. We've started speaking in churches now that will have us and things like, everybody won't let us in there.
The hard part.
And so I'm very interested to hear your journey, and then we'll talk about your experiences here in a minute. But how did you go from veteran to cop to preacher?
Sure. So I went to ROTC. I was on a scholarship in college. The officer route. My dad was an officer in the Air Force, and he was like, "Hey, you're either going to join the military or get a college, scholarship." So I ended up getting an ROTC scholarship. And that was like my dream, was like to join the military. And, I went to airborne school and I was a freshman in college and I was kind of hooked.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting assigned to a special forces unit and just had a really awesome, time in the military. I loved it. And it was weird. Like, I thought I was going to be a career military guy.
I did too.
I had a couple generals that I became friends with that were like, man, you could be where we're at one day. And I'm like, that's what I want, And then I just felt this random feeling. I was a Christian, but I did not have a relationship with God. So at the time, I wouldn't recognize it was God telling me.
Right.
But now I see God told me to get out. He just told me to get out of the military. I was supposed to promote to captain and go to the SFQ course. And he told me to get out. And so I was like, okay. And so I was applying to different police departments. Well, during that time is when I basically got called out by this girl at my church, and I had this wild encounter with God where he told me, like, you've never served me a day in your life.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I was a mega church drummer. I'd been in church since I was a kid, and God's telling me you've never lived for me a day in your life.
Yeah.
And so I had this moment of like conviction, and I confessed, and I really gave my life to the Lord. That happened in January 2016, and I had already dropped my papers to leave in April. So now I have this period where I feel like I'm called to preach. Like literally the day after I got born again, I was like preaching on social media. I was like, look what God did in my life. I've been saved like a day.
Yeah.
So I had this weird struggle where, okay, I felt like police work was the next best step.
Right.
It made sense. But now I don't even really want to be a cop anymore. I want to be a preacher. So I was kind of wrestling with that through the academy. And I ended up just kind of laying it down to the Lord in the capacity that I wanted to do it, because I wasn't even ready. I was a baby Christian.
Yeah.
So I would preach on the street. Everywhere I would go, I'd pray for people. I'd preach on planes and buses, just anywhere. I'd just open air preach. And I did that for like 5 years while I was a cop at night. And then in 2020, I started preaching on TikTok because COVID hit. All the kids are on TikTok. Exploded on TikTok, 800,000 followers in less than a year. And through that, I got linked up with Turning Point. I got linked up with this group called One Voice Student Missions, which is who I'm with.
Okay.
They're more commonly known as the Jesus Clubs. That's one of our kind of arms. But we help set up clubs in high schools, public schools, where kids are preaching during lunch.
Wow.
It's incredible. Like in California, we had like 700-800 kids packing an auditorium
That's
every
amazing.
week.
Yeah.
To hear the gospel. So it was really cool. So I linked up with them, and I was just kind of posting content with them. And I was running my TikTok. I was a cop. I was trying to work overtime to pay off bills, and I felt like I had 2 full-time jobs.
Right.
And I was like, Lord, something's got to give,
Exactly.
And basically, long story short, I went down to visit these guys, these missionaries in Texas for like a 3-day retreat. And on the way home on this red-eye flight, God spoke to me and was like, you'll never work another shift as a cop. Like, you're going to go be an unpaid missionary. And I started bawling on the plane because I knew it was God.
Yeah.
And within 19 days of him speaking that, I quit my job, we sold our house, and I moved a pregnant wife across the country to Texas, and I've been doing mission work ever since.
I love it.
So
I love it.
It was a really random encounter, because I had a 6-year plan to pay my house off, thanks to Dave Ramsey. We were going to move to Florida, buy a nice house in cash, no mortgage, and just start a ministry. Because no doors were opening, so I said, God, I don't see anything, so I'm going to go after this until you move me.
Right.
And then a month or two later, he moved us big time.
Yeah.
So
that is.
It was wild.
It's a crazy story. Okay.
Yeah.
So so is missionary like the main?
I'm an American missionary.
American missionary.
Yeah.
Okay. So in today's society, especially since it's the last 2 years or so, I'm curious, how is that? How are you perceived? How are you accepted in churches and things like that? Because I know us, we have made a very dramatic shift, but we have, this 8 years now of being this super everywhere, super vocal, conservative guy, Christian.
Yeah, of course.
But very, very, bam, like in your face.
They know what you stand for.
Yeah. It's very obvious. If Graham Allen comes and speaks at your whatever, you know what's going to be talked about.
Right.
And so I felt very similarly. Ran for Congress, didn't go my way, which I know now was the Lord.
Yeah.
But once it was over, I told everybody before I ran for Congress, I truly believe that because of what we do and who we know, I saw like 40% behind the veil of politics. When I ran for Congress, I truly believe that God allowed me to see 50% behind the veil. And that extra 10% was so dark.
Wow.
And it was so evil and it was so corrupt that when the race, I was actually happy when President Trump called me, because, we know each other pretty well. And he called me to let me know out of respect, hey, I'm going to go with the other guy. And which I thought was really classy of him to do that, because he didn't have to, you know. And but when he called me, I found myself relieved, and I was like, okay, cool. And the ironic thing is, my entire career, I wanted to get to the level to where I was speaking at Trump rallies, because in the conservative world, if you can make it to a level that you're speaking at Trump, you have made it, right? Like you have, there's
about as big as it gets.
No bigger platform, right? So I finally get to speak. This was January, okay? Finally get to speak. There's 35,000 people there.
Wow.
And I didn't even want to do it, very much like you. I finally reached this pinnacle that for 8 years I've been trying to get to, and when I'm finally there, I don't even want to be there, and I don't even want to do it. And because I felt God was telling me, okay, you've seen it now.
Yeah.
You've seen things that nobody else is going to know or will have seen. Now I want you to go tell the church about it.
Wow.
And now I want you to go tell them, hey, this is what's actually going on. And this is why I believe that Christians need to be engaged and empowered to take back our culture instead of our churches being allowed to be influenced by our culture.
No, it's true.
And so, anyway, that was a long thing to get to the point of, since then, 2 churches have let me come speak since then. And so I'm curious, what has your experience been, and what has your reception been, and what it is that the Lord has brought you to do?
Sure. I think for me, like, I'm very clear on where I stand, and I tell people, I don't say, I'm a Republican or something. I'm a conservative person.
Absolutely.
And that is only because the closer I get to Jesus, the more conservative my views become.
It's weird how that happens.
It's just, I'm just not a liberal progressive type person. I just don't identify with any of that.
Right.
And so when I'm voting, I'm looking for candidates that align with my biblical values.
Absolutely.
I care less about the other stuff, honestly.
Yeah.
But for me, while I make that stuff known, like, that's not really what I've used my platform for.
Absolutely.
And I kind of was wrestling with that when I started to, I was gaining a lot of followers. I think I was gaining like 20 or 30,000 a week on TikTok and like 5,000 a week on Instagram. So it was like exploding.
Yeah.
And, it was right during all the, pandemic stuff or whatever. And I was wrestling with like, what can I post and what should I not post? And I would post something sometimes and the Lord would be like, take that down. I did not give you a platform for that.
Right.
And so he quickly made it clear like what my platform is going to be about. And it was pretty much strictly like preaching the gospel and tearing down strongholds, wrong ways of thinking, and specific issues like abortion and, same-sex marriage and all that stuff. I speak out about that. But as far as like politically, people, while they know where I stand, I've never like gone there from the pulpit.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that it's been a little easier for me. Honestly, the biggest pushback I get is like a lot of people don't believe in miracles. They don't want me to come pray for the sick or something because or they think like I'm going to go up there and like cast a demon out or something crazy.
How you can claim to be a Christian and not believe in miracles is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Again, this goes with, and I like the way that here's where I'm at, and I would love, your disagreements or agree.
Yeah.
Here's where I'm at. I believe that COVID and everything revealed so much about the church.
100%.
And when I say the church, I'm talking about the infrastructure, right?
Right.
The leadership of these churches, et cetera. I believe that there is going to be, very much like yourself, I believe there's going to be a new generation, pastors, evangelists, missionaries, church planners, et cetera, that don't look like people think that they're supposed to look. They don't sound the way that people think they're supposed to sound. And I also believe that there are different people for different things.
Yes.
A lot of people don't want to talk about the word prophet anymore because it like weirds people out, But in the Bible, there was even prophets back then. And prophets were more of the people of warning more than anything else. Like, hey, do you not see what's going on? Do you not see what you're doing? Do you not see how we've turned away and how our world is suffering because of it?
Yes.
And maybe you can speak to this, maybe not. It seems like in church culture right now, all people want is people that only preach, if you love Jesus, everything's going to work out okay.
Yeah.
And God's going to take care of you. They seem to not want any room for people like yourself.
Right.
Like I said, people hate the word prophets, but people that come with warning, it just seems like there seems to be this push to dumb down.
It's true.
And water down religion.
No, it's true. And a prophet really should serve as a guide, like a prophetic, like spiritual direction of a church. And like you said, to warn like, hey, we are muddying up our message with culture, or culture is, seeping into our church. Like we need to stay vigilant.
And it should be the exact opposite.
And unfortunately, that stuff doesn't put butts in seats.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, like I'm not mad at the church, I'm upset. because I started to realize that churches that are dependent on finances at some point will sacrifice the voice of the Lord
Right.
for what practically is going to bring the tithe in.
Right.
You know, even
Yeah.
if you have someone who starts with a pure heart, I feel like the way the model is set up, there's going to come a time where it's like, man, if I start talking about this,
Yep.
or if I go against this, or if I call this issue out I know is in my church, I'm going to lose some members, and our budget just can't handle that.
Yeah.
And that is earthly wisdom. It's sensual and demonic.
Oh, I know
you
that's true because
It's
I've had
unfortunate.
conversations with pastors and that have said those exact things.
And they're afraid to bring you in because they're like, if we bring this guy in, he's going to rub people the wrong way.
Yep.
And some of them might be donors. And so we're just safer to
Right.
not bring guys like you in.
Exactly. And so my question is, and I've asked everybody this, for the listeners that see what we see,
Right.
they feel what we feel. We just talked about on another interview I did how I believe that there are churches that are so spiritually dead that it is truly just this transactional thing. You show up, you do your thing. Oh, I love Jesus. Text, your name and save to this number, which is really just a data collection scheme, is all that is. And what do we say to the people that feel that, like you and me, and I'm still working that out on my side, because how do I do that? How do I do more kingdom work when, and I hate to say it like this because it sounds so just pompous, but when Graham Allen is this person that for 8 years has just been such this a blunt instrument for conservative values in America, right? What would you say to people that are feeling that tug on their heart? Like, what do they do? Like, what steps do they take? They're in a spiritually dead church or a woke church. They feel like God's telling them to do something, but they don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. For me, we were serving in a church that there was some compromise in areas, and we just felt after serving for a while that it was time to go.
Yeah.
And we loved, we had a leadership changeover because of some issues, and we loved the leaders who took over, but there were just still some things that we were not really cool with, and I don't know, it just felt like it was our time to step away. And so I think first it's like having permission to leave.
Yeah.
First of all, we didn't leave church hurt or anything like that. We didn't go church shopping. We just felt like, man, our season here is up. And I had served there for 8 years.
Right.
On the worship team and all kinds of places. And I ended up going back to a church that I'd been involved in that was super spirit-filled, just loved the Lord, really in every way would submit to Jesus and his leadership, especially on the weekend services. And so we just felt like, man, this is where we're called to be. And, a couple months after switching there is when we got called out, and now we're in Texas. We go to an amazing church. We go to Upper Room in Dallas, which is such a blessing. But I think people need to understand, you need to have permission to leave. If you feel like God has called you to that church, then maybe start having some conversations, with leaders or whatever, and say, hey, I'm coming humbly with this, but I'm noticing this, and it's a discrepancy with the word, and I just kind of want to understand what's happening. Maybe there's a perspective I don't have. I think that's taking the humble route instead of saying I see this is wrong. Give them a chance to explain.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll give you a perspective that you didn't have, or maybe they'll bury themselves with a horrible answer and you'll have your confirmation.
Right.
But I think, the right thing to do would be to approach the leadership, see if they're willing to change or at least talk about it. And if not, ask the Lord, really, do you want me to continue going here? What's my purpose? Am I supposed to be here, or am I, involved in kind of a social club, you know? And find a good spirit-filled church.
Yeah, absolutely.
But don't get bitter. Don't leave angry. Don't leave church hurt. Understand that, man, some of them are doing the best they can. We're just destroyed for lack of knowledge. And some of them really don't have pure hearts, and they're out for money, or they're out for fame, or they're out for whatever.
Right.
I don't want to be involved with that either.
Yeah.
Even since the last year and a half, I've had to kind of distance myself from a couple people that I have done ministry with because some things have come up. And I contacted them personally, and they didn't want to repent, and they openly said, like, hey, I'm going to keep doing this thing. And I said, well, hey, I love you, but I can't support you anymore. And I kind of silently withdrew my support. And so I think just that takes courage too. You know, it's uncomfortable, but just finding that space to be like, man, it's okay for me to leave a place that is not flowing with fresh water, that is not producing the fruits of the Spirit, and go find a place that is. Yeah. That's not church shopping because I'm hurt because they talked about this and whatever. I think that's saying, man, I want to be filled on a weekly basis, right? And I'm going to go find a place that'll do it.
What would you say, as Christians, what would you say is the biggest threat to Christians right now, our biggest misunderstanding or biggest lie that Christians are believing right this second?
Oh, man, I just think, you know, so much of the world is creeping in to the church. And the biggest threat, I believe, honestly, is pastors that aren't speaking out.
Right.
Because they are responsible for their congregation. And if you're going to call yourself a pastor, which, you know, people have been calling me pastor this weekend, and I'm like, dude, I'm not a pastor. You know, I'm a preacher.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you pastor a digital flock. And I'm like, you know, whatever, thanks.
Yeah.
But if you're going to call yourself a pastor or take the role of a pastor, you have to understand that you're being entrusted with sheep. Like, you're the shepherd. And a shepherd that allows a wolf to come in is not a good shepherd. Right. And there's even a parable, I can't remember where it's in Luke, because Luke's full of parables, but it talks about how the shepherd or the gardener, whoever it was, he allowed this enemy to come in and sow tares. And God will allow it to grow. He'll actually allow this thing to happen. He'll separate it later. But the point was, like, you could have this shepherd that is weak and unwilling to speak up about things and unwilling to really lead people, which isn't always popular. I found that out when I was an officer in the Army. You know, I had 76 soldiers. I was 22 years old. Yeah. Some of them were older than...
Old Butterbar,
They had been in longer than I'd been alive.
Yeah.
And I'm leading them. You know, that required humility. I leaned on my NCOs. You know, I leaned on those who had been there. But
E7s
there was
are lifesavers.
Yes, but there were times when I had to make the decision.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, I always had to make the decision, but there were times where I had to go against what people were saying because I really felt like this is what's going to be best. Yeah. And it wasn't popular, but it would, at the end, they would go, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we did it this way. You know, and sometimes it wouldn't work out. I owned that. I think pastors need to get into this place of realizing, like, hey, you have to make bold decisions. You're going to have to talk about certain things, because if you don't, and this kind of ties in with everything we're talking about, if you don't speak to culture, then only culture is going to be speaking. Only the voice of the enemy is going to be speaking. Right. And what I'm seeing even on TikTok, you know, if you scroll for 5 minutes on TikTok, like, it's pretty bad. This is what kids are seeing. Yeah. So imagine if you took every Christian voice out of TikTok. It would just be bad. Yeah. Kids are still on it. So we need more people speaking. We need pastors who are willing to stand up, because the Bible makes it clear, like, if you're going to let an enemy come in, God will allow what's happening to fester and to grow in order that later there would be a separation. But that's going to hurt in the process. And so, you know, I made a video warning pastors saying, hey, I love you guys. Please don't let the enemy come in. It says while they were asleep. That's what the parable says. While they were asleep, an enemy came in and sowed tares. Yeah. And I'm like, how many people have been spiritually asleep, or they're playing sleep? Like when you're a kid and your mom walks in late at night and you pretend to be asleep. You know, I don't know why we did that. But like, how many pastors have pretended to be asleep to certain issues, and the enemy's just coming in sowing tares? Yeah. You know? Absolutely. And ruining the wheat. And so it's like, man, we need people who are bold. And that's why I'm thankful for people like you who are like unapologetically
I'm thankful for people
out.
like you, man.
Thank you.
Last question here is, what would you say to the people, and I'm asking for myself when I say this, what would you say to the people that feel like God's telling them to go do stuff? I'm not a pastor. I have no desire. I don't have the temperament to be a pastor. I just don't. I mean, you know, everybody's got their gifts. Everybody's got their... And not everybody is everybody's flavor, right? Like some people like expository preaching. Some people like topical only. Some people like topical mixed with expository. Some people like super energetic preachers. Some people like line by line this and that. I am a realist in understanding everybody's not going to be everybody's flavor, and I get that. What would you say to people that feel like God's telling them to do something, but they just feel underqualified to do it?
That's good.
Because I know that God, you can't possibly be telling me to do these things. Do you know how many mistakes I've made?
Right.
There's no way that I could do this stuff. What would you say to the people that hopefully feel that way? Because I feel like that's kind of like a prerequisite. Like you
Totally.
should feel like
You should feel it.
you're not worthy to do something like that. What would you say to those people that are stirring with that right now?
Sure. Well, the Bible, it talks about like he doesn't call the qualified.
Yeah.
He qualifies the called, you know, and that's such a popular saying, but it's true. Like if you look through the Bible, think about the Hebrews Hall of Faith in chapter 11. All these people that are named had massive failures in some way, but that is not what they're remembered for.
Right.
Like they're remembered for trusting in God through their life. And so I want to encourage people whatever mistakes you've made, you're not defined by that. If we're Christians, we're not defined by our good works. We're certainly not defined by our bad works. We're defined by the work of the cross, the finished work. And so Colossians 1, it says we're holy, blameless, and righteous in the sight of God if we continue in the faith, if we continue enduring and just believing that God, really feels this way about us. So I think proper identity is going to help someone step into what they're doing, because if they don't, they might feel called, but that insecurity will eat them alive, and it'll probably choke them out and keep them quiet. So it's like, one, just submit and be like, man, maybe I'm not awesome, or maybe I am. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
God is awesome. He wants to use my voice for whatever reason. I feel like he does. And so I'm just going to submit. And whatever that looks like, don't try to be someone else. Just go. Like we don't need another Billy Graham. You know, he came and went, and we're so thankful for everything he did. We need whoever you are. We need the next person. We have enough. We don't need more imitations. We need unique personalities, because you're going to reach people that I could never reach, and vice versa.
Well, that's so weird. I just said that the other day.
It's true.
There.
And so it's like we're all needed, and we'll reach a lot of the same people, but we will reach people that each other can't. And so I think it's just people coming in first with a proper identity of who they are and who God is. I'm not more awesome for doing this. I'm not less awesome because of the way that I've lived. I'm defined by the blood of Jesus. Okay, cool. My identity is in check. Now I have to be obedient. Doesn't actually matter how I feel.
Yeah.
God wants me to be obedient. I even think about David, who God asked him to build this altar. And so David went to get all the supplies for it. And this guy was like, here, I'll give you everything you need. And David's like, no, I need to pay for it. And the guy's like, no, I'll give it to you. And David says, I will not build something for the Lord that doesn't cost me anything. And so it was such a testament, because he could have taken everything for free.
Yeah. So
we need to build things that cost us something, and maybe it costs people their comfort.
Yeah.
My wife does not like speaking at all. She doesn't.
Neither does mine. She doesn't like it at all.
But she has felt just gnawed at by this loving conviction of the Lord telling her, you've been disobedient. I've been telling you to speak for 2 years. And so she's finally submitted in obedience, totally uncomfortable to her, but she started speaking. She started going live and doing all these other little interviews and stuff. And so it's like God desires our obedience more than anything else.
Yeah.
So for these people that are going, know your identity in Christ, know who you are, and just be obedient. It doesn't have to feel amazing,
Yeah.
You don't have to enjoy doing it, but if God's telling you to do it, then I would rather walk in obedience than not. And you'll be amazed at the fruit. I mean, I never thought I'd be where I'm at now.
Yeah.
I wanted to reach as many people as possible, but I didn't think I'd have, over 1 million followers and be doing all this stuff and preaching to, tons of people. God's brought me here in a year. What's he going to do in 10 years? I don't know, but I'm just going to keep saying yes, because he's never forsaken me. And David even said, I've never seen the righteous forsaken.
Yeah.
So I just want to continue saying yes, and we'll see where he takes me.
I like that. Give God your yes. All right. What a great way to end that on. Where can people go to support you, see what you got going on? Well, where can people go?
Yeah. Well, I have a website, ShaneWinnings.com. Just basic info. I can be booked on there for speaking. They can donate to our ministry. They can buy my devotional. for $10, or they just on any social media, search my name, Shane Winnings on YouTube or Shane.Winnings on Instagram and TikTok.
I love it. Well, I've loved this conversation.
Yeah, me too,
I'm
man.
going to come hear you preach, man.
Cool.
Oklahoma, right?
Yeah, we're gonna do it.
I'm going. I want to check it out.
It's gonna be awesome.
We're going to have to have you come on more.
That'd be
to where
great.
we can have longer conversations. But thanks so much,
Awesome.
man. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thanks a lot.
Absolutely.